I decree, Karmelo Anthony will walk free.
Tensions begin to rise at the Colin County Courthouse as demonstrators begin to protest both in favor of Austin Metcalf and also Karmelo Anthony. In this episode of Criminal Motives, we'll break down Karmelo Anthony's self-defense claims. Will self-defense hold weight in court? Welcome to Criminal Motives. My name is Matthew Pfeiffer. I'm a therapist, coach, author, and I break down different events that are happening in true crime. This is episode 2 on a series I'm doing on the trial of Karmelo Anthony. If that's the type of content that you enjoy, be sure to like, share, subscribe, turn on notifications so you don't miss a thing. With all that being said, let's watch this next video together and I'll give you my thoughts after.
You wonder if a small rain shower didn't postpone a track meet in the spring of last year near Dallas, what would Austin Metcalf be doing today? What would Karmelo Anthony be doing? Of course, we'll never know the answer to that. But what we do know is that security is tight at the courthouse in McKinney, Texas, because of all the attention that this story is getting.
I decree, Karmelo Anthony will walk free.
Here's video of demonstrators outside the courthouse in McKinney, Texas today in support of Karmelo Anthony. There's actually a GiveSendGo for Karmelo that's raised more than $600,000. And we've been seeing an influx of donations this morning with new attention on this case ahead of trial. Jury selection's underway right now, and I'm going to bring in Cody Thomas from Court TV in a moment, who's outside the courthouse. We'll talk through what we can expect this week. We have been told they've been going through roughly 600 potential jurors in this case ahead of opening statements. Let's go back to when this story first started, April 2nd, 2025. It was a rainy day in Frisco, Texas, and local high schools had gathered for a track meet. Austin Metcalf's and Karmelo Anthony's schools were competing in this track meet. Now, if you've ever run track, you know that teams typically have spots around the track where athletes can hang out with their teammates between events. In Austin Metcalf's case, he was with his twin brother and teammates under a tent, according to police. So this rainstorm comes in and it delays the track meet. Witnesses say another athlete who wasn't on Metcalf's team stood under Metcalf's tent. The name of that athlete was Karmelo Anthony.
Karmelo Anthony, class of 2025, Centennial High School, Frisco, Texas.
This is video of Karmelo Anthony mic'd up for a football tournament for Carolina Sports District on YouTube. Now, Anthony and Metcalf, they were both football stars at their high schools. Metcalf was actually taking some pretty big recruiting visits, and he planned to play at the next level. Anthony also posted on social media that he was receiving scholarship offers, and he planned to play college football. So you know a little bit more about them now. And you have this rainy day at a track meet, and people were looking for cover from the rain. So Anthony goes under Metcalf's tent, according to police. And at some point, the two of them get into a confrontation. According to witnesses, Metcalf told Anthony to leave his team's tent. And at that point, Anthony allegedly reached into his bag and said something along the lines of, "Make me." Now, here is what Austin's twin brother told WFAA television.
There was this kid, before I knew his name now, this kid was sitting under our tent at track. We asked him to move. He started getting aggressive and talking reckless. And my brother stepped in and said, "You need to move." He's like, "Make me move." Austin grabbed his backpack. The kid, I tried to whip around as fast as I could, but I didn't see the stab.
Police say Metcalf then went to move Anthony from under the tent. And at that point, Karmelo Anthony allegedly pulls out a knife and stabs Metcalf in the chest. Metcalf died in his twin brother's arms. Now, what Anthony allegedly did next could be very critical in this trial. So Anthony allegedly ran to another part of the track after stabbing Metcalf. And when police arrived, the first officer to make contact with Anthony wrote in the arrest report that he asked Anthony to put his hands in the air. Then Anthony allegedly said, quote, "I was protecting myself." The officer also said that Anthony told him, quote, "He put his hands on me." And when the officer said he had Anthony in custody, the teen allegedly said, quote, "I'm not alleged, I did it." Police say Karmelo Anthony ditched the knife and ran before he was arrested by officers who note in their reports that Anthony was hysterically crying when he was arrested, and he asked if Metcalf would be okay. Now, a critical piece of evidence in this case also is going to be surveillance footage. It exists. The Frisco Independent School District has video from a camera that was mounted on the stadium where this track meet was happening, and it allegedly captures the moment that Austin Metcalf was killed. Now, the school district did not release a copy of this video to the public, but it allowed a group of reporters in Dallas to see it. And WFAA television was one of the stations that got their eyes on this video. And they say the video, it's a wide angle shot of the stadium. And you can somewhat see the incident in the small left corner of the screen. The television station writes, quote, "It's difficult to determine how many people are present or what exactly is happening at the tent." Now, Anthony is expected to argue that he had to stab Austin Metcalf in self-defense. Now, I spoke with Texas attorney Bridget Williams about self-defense cases in Texas and what you have to prove. And she says that Anthony may have an uphill battle making that argument.
But what I would say is that he doesn't necessarily have a very strong argument there for self-defense. Hopefully his defense counsel has something that they're going to be talking about in trial that we haven't heard yet. But based off of just what the law is right now, you have, as self-defense, you have to bring equal force to whatever it is that is assaulting you or that you are presented with. So if someone is pushing you, you don't necessarily have the liberty to go back and shoot them with a gun or stab them with a knife, right? Equal force for pushing would be back with your hands, right? That is equal force. And so it rises above equal force for what we would consider for self-defense on paper.
Now, at the same time, you have Karmelo Anthony allegedly telling police that he felt threatened. And the prosecution is going for first-degree murder in this case, meaning they believe this was premeditated.
Yes, I think that's a great point. And those are the issues and the matters that the defense counsel will be raising, because those things are up to interpretation, right? And that's what's best for a trial setting. So again, on paper, it's supposed to be equal force. But when you move forward to a trial, the defense counsel is going to be discussing how he felt that this was in fact equal. This was the reason why he felt that he needed to do this in order to save his life, or why he felt it was necessary in order for him to walk away alive. So he had to do this, otherwise he didn't feel like he would have been able to walk away.
Anthony was initially held on $1 million bond. But then the judge in this case, less than 2 weeks after Karmelo Anthony was arrested, lowered his bond to $250,000, and Karmelo Anthony was able to make that. So he has been out of jail as this case has moved forward to a trial. This is video per WFAA of Anthony walking free. He has been required to wear a GPS monitor and be on house arrest, and he's also had to check in with the court weekly since he posted that bond. But when that bond was lowered, it took the attention surrounding this case, frankly, the tension surrounding this case, to a new level. The judge in this case received threats online. You have had people, both supporters of Karmelo Anthony, but also supporters of Austin Metcalf, going at each other online. We are expecting to see demonstrations outside the courthouse for this trial. And in the wake of his release from jail last year, Karmelo Anthony's family held a news conference talking about how they had been the victim of threats. This is Karmelo's mom per KDFW.
In wake of this tragic incident, our family has been under attack. Whatever you think what happened between Karmelo and the Metcalf boys, my 3 younger children, my husband, and I didn't do anything to deserve to be threatened, harassed, and lied about.
Now, one thing I remember from that news conference is not just the tension of people who are looking at this case and they have an opinion about what happened, but also there has been a lot of tension between the families of Karmelo Anthony and Austin Metcalf, which certainly, when you think of the stakes of this case, when you think of the life that was lost, you understand that. But at that same news conference, Jeff Metcalf, who is Austin's dad, showed up and stood in front of cameras in sunglasses until he had to be escorted out. This is per KTVT. Now, all of this took place last year. The death of Austin Metcalf, this news conference, the posting of the bond. But now here in 2026, we're on the verge of a divisive and potentially explosive trial getting underway. Join us now outside the courthouse in Collin County, Texas, where this trial is slated to take place. Cody Thomas from Court TV. Always good to see you, Cody. Thanks for being with us. There's been a lot of talk about a lot of the tension in the community surrounding this case going back to last year. And I know there's some tight restrictions as far as what we can do as media when it comes to covering this case and what type of access there's going to be. You're outside the courthouse. I know jury selection's going on. Just set the mood for us. Like, what does it look like out there right now?
Yeah, Chris, always great to be with you, my friend. It's a lot slower than I expected here today. Of course, it is a jury selection day and it is a little early in the morning, but we haven't seen many demonstrators. In fact, as I'm looking now, I only see maybe 5 to 7 of them starting to congregate away from the courthouse, maybe about 100 yards or so away from the courthouse, because again, they've set a bunch of rules because of how emotionally charged this case is and how impactful it is to this community down here for both sides, each party, Austin Metcalf and Karmelo Anthony. Of course, you know, the blatant optics of the case here. We have a young black kid stabbing a young white kid. So that automatically across this country causes, you know, some polarization among the people who have taken this case in. And of course, that has brought about this tension here. But the judge has laid down some ground rules inside this courtroom. I mean, you can't bring in any electronics. We can't live stream it. You can't record anything. Even us as media can be in the courtroom, but we can only have electronics for note-taking purposes. You can't wear any clothing that suggests any sentiment toward either side. The judge really laying down the law out here, and there's barricades around some of the courthouse steps. But again, Chris, out here, it's pretty slow today. There's no sign of Karmelo or Austin Metcalf's family right now, but I'm sure we'll get some more of that as this week picks up, as opening statements are expected to get underway tomorrow morning.
Yeah, and I mean, I just remember back to when Karmelo Anthony's bond was brought down to $250,000. He was able to post that. He's been on house arrest, and he's been on a GPS monitor ever since. But the judge had received threats as well. I mean, there's just so much of this case that has played out kind of in the internet world, along political lines. There's a lot of dynamics, and it's going to be interesting to see if any of that actually makes its way into the courtroom. I know you talked about the jury selection process, which is going on right now, opening statements potentially slated for tomorrow, but there's like a lot of potential jurors that they're going to be going through in this trial.
Absolutely, Chris. I actually just found out about a half hour ago. I mean, they said they started with a pool of about 600 potential jurors, and I can imagine how much of a tall task that it could be to try to find an impartial jury. I mean, as many headlines as this case has garnered and how politically charged it's become, how racially charged it's become, people have their opinions on things like this. I mean, we see it every day when we turn the TV on. And now I've learned that they've whittled down from 600 down to about 250. That's what the media liaison told me inside the courtroom. I was in there for about an hour earlier before coming back out here. He was giving me kind of a rundown of where we are. Of course, jury selection started 2 days ago on Monday, and now we're here on Wednesday. And he says if things go as expected, if they're able to get that impartial jury and seat one today, opening statements expected tomorrow. But who knows? It could bleed into tomorrow with jury selection. It could bleed into the rest of this week. I mean, we've seen jury selections last for multiple days, weeks at a time in certain cases that we've covered here, Court TV and Law and Crime. But they are trying to stay on schedule and get those opening statements done or started by tomorrow.
Yeah, and I mean, you just think about how many people they are going through and just the process to get down to that small amount who will eventually determine how this trial goes. Just from the people right now, I know you talked about just about 5 to 7 people outside the courthouse and potentially, especially when you think of opening statements, I mean, there could be a lot of people just with all the tension that we've been talking about related to this case. But what are you seeing out there right now, just as far as like these protesters, potentially, you know, supporters, whoever they may be, of what they're doing?
Yeah, so I'm looking over, as I look to my right over here now, it seems like the crowd's grown to maybe 10, 12, maybe going on 15 people. It looks like I see some signage that may say Black Lives Matter, so I assume they are in support of Karmelo's side of what's going on. I haven't seen any other protest groups, but I did learn from one of the media outlets that was here earlier this week that there was a demonstration for people in support of Karmelo, and then there was a demonstration for people in support of Austin Metcalf's family and that side of the situation. And he was saying that, you know, this earlier this week, a couple days ago, that the tension seemed a little high and that he thought something might happen out here. I don't know if they were yelling back at each other, but he said one side had a megaphone. He said he went to talk to some of them. They talked briefly, and then somebody came up and cut them off and said, yeah, we're not talking to anybody. So, of course, you know, the emotions, just the polarization, Chris. But right now what I'm seeing, not much going on outside of those 10 or 15 people as I look around. Again, it's a slow day, but it is also early in the day as well. That's not to say that later this afternoon it could ramp up and pick up once people start getting off work or on their lunch hour or what have you. But right now it's still a little slow here outside the Colin County Courthouse.
Yeah, and you just wonder too what the security is going to look like, as well as those crowds grow there in Collin County. Going to the facts of the case as we know them at this point, the allegations to this point, and again, Karmelo Anthony is facing a charge of first-degree murder in this case, and there could be, if found guilty, a very serious sentence. And it's always, I kind of just go back and think, both of them were on track to graduate. Both of them had plans, going beyond high school, and then you have this track meet. And I keep thinking, imagine if there just wasn't that rainstorm that day, just that brief storm that then kind of put this track meet to a stop. Where would we be today? And I know that that's a question we'll never know the answer to, and it is what it is. But as far as the narrative that's been laid out of what happened at this track meet and how we got to this point, what stands out to you?
Yeah, Chris, just walking people back through it that may not know, just painting the scene in a brief nutshell here. You had, if you've ever been to a track meet, you have multiple teams that are kind of on the same side of the bleachers. And honestly, whether rain or shine, people set up tents anyway because the sun is beating down so hard. But you have multiple schools. And for some reason, unbeknownst to anyone, Karmelo Anthony was under the tent for Austin Metcalf's school. Karmelo and Austin did not go to the same school. To which, young guys, they're 17 years old, seniors in high school, the testosterone gets flowing. Austin says, hey, Karmelo, get out from under our tent. Not knowing exactly how he said that. We don't know how exactly that phrasing went, but pretty much trying to get Karmelo out from under the tent. We don't know why Karmelo was there. Apparently a verbal scuffle started, and eyewitnesses, some students there who saw things went down, say at some point they saw Karmelo reach into his book bag and hold his hand into his book bag and say something to the effect of, touch me and see what happens. To which Austin Metcalf was like, all right, and he goes to shove the kid, and then Karmelo pulls out a knife and stabs him in the chest, and then Austin Metcalf dies in his brother's arms there in the bleachers. Karmelo runs off, and police say Karmelo actually admitted to stabbing the kid, but he, of course, is claiming self-defense. So it's just a sad situation all around, but one of the questions that stands out to me, Chris, my mom was an educator, so I'm very familiar with, how rules at schools work. The one question is, at 17 years old, why'd you have a knife, let alone on school grounds, which is also illegal within itself. So I'm pretty sure that's going to be a really damaging fact. I don't know how his defense is going to be able to explain that part of it once this trial gets underway. But that's what stood out to me about this entire narrative here. But again, like you were saying, two young men on track to graduate. If that rainstorm hadn't happened, if Karmelo wasn't under that tent, if this verbal altercation didn't happen, these men were going to go off and likely do great things with their lives, but now we're both stuck here. One kid is gone, of course, and one kid's liberty is at stake here as far as being behind bars for the rest of his life. So just sad all around for these two young men and their families, of course. Yeah, it's just an incredibly tragic case. And I know just from when it happened that there is some surveillance video from the stadium itself, but according to the local media that looked at it, you don't really see a lot. And it's going to be interesting, especially for his defense of how do you paint this narrative? If it's a self-defense argument, can you, get a jury to believe that his life was in danger? But to your point, I think the big question that so many people are going to have, and I think about the jurors who will eventually be in that box, it's why did you have a knife at a track meet? And I just feel how do you get to the point where you answer that question? Absolutely. And I mean, that I feel that's going to be the crux of the whole case. Because, young men for decades, as the dawn of time, have gotten in fights. I mean, yes. You and I went to school. We've probably seen a couple of fights ourselves, of course, but I never seen a fight among teenagers where knives were involved or, deadly weapons were involved, and especially on school grounds. I'm sure it probably happens somewhere, but typically I'd imagine that'd be off school grounds somewhere where it's not the school's responsibility or anything like that. Not that I'm condoning it or anything, but it's just how are they going to explain it? I feel that's going to be what tilts the jury no matter what other facts come out. And especially to your point as well, Chris, if there's video, of course, we haven't seen the video. There's been a gag order on this case since pretty much, it started going into litigation about a year ago. If there's surveillance that really shows Karmelo as kind of the aggressor here, I don't know how that narrative is going to get painted. Yeah, no, 100%. And you think, too, the witnesses in the area where all of this took place, this was Austin Metcalf's team that was under this tent. And you wonder how many witnesses are going to come up who will testify at this trial. We'll see what happens.
All right, welcome back. So you heard from a couple of different attorneys between this episode and my first episode that Karmelo Anthony has an uphill battle with the self-defense claims. And I know a lot of people aren't going to like hearing this, but I 100% agree. And I mentioned before that when I put my therapeutic hat on, I can make an argument that Karmelo felt like he was in danger, that he possibly does see himself as a victim. And I can actually make an argument as a therapist that maybe he possibly is a victim. However, even if you're a victim, you can still be wrong in the way that you handle things. I mentioned this in the previous episode, that if someone pushes you, doesn't mean that you can just shoot them. So there's a difference between actually being a victim and then what the rule of law is. And the law with self-defense is that the level of self-defense needs to equate to the proportion of the aggression that is going against you. So even if Austin was pushing him, punching him, let's even say kicking him, let's say that he was winning this fight, I don't really see justification for him being stabbed in that situation. But even if I wanted to give Karmelo the benefit of the doubt, there's another bigger problem. And a lot of people are making a very big deal at the fact that Karmelo was under the tent to begin with. And what I can tell you is that as a track athlete, you begin to become friends with a lot of other schools, even if you're rivals and that sort of thing. It's not uncommon to hang out with the other athletes from the other schools, especially here in Texas, where track is a very big deal. I'm 45 years old, and I'm still friends with a lot of athletes that I met from other schools through track. So I can see the argument there, and I can understand the reasons why Karmelo was under the tent to begin with. And the prosecution admitted today that Austin definitely was the aggressor. And I think that the prosecution did that intentionally because they know that there's no justification for the self-defense claim. Because at the end of the day, why did Karmelo bring a knife to a track meet? There is no reason for it. And even if you wanted to say that he thought that he was going to be in danger, that previous days or previous hours that they were having issues, and so he brought it for his own safety, there's a multitude of other steps that he could have taken if that was the case. So I'm going to be very interested to see over the next days and few weeks or however long this trial lasts, to see what or how Karmelo Anthony's defense attorneys try to come up with or try to spin a story of the reason why he had a knife to begin with. Now, I mentioned before that there was rumors that this was a cleat sharpener or some sort of tool that they use in track. I thought that might have held a little bit more weight, but we do now know that it definitely was a knife and not some sort of tool. So let me know your thoughts in the comments below. With all that being said, thank you very much for watching. Be sure to like, share, subscribe, turn on notifications so you're notified each and every time I upload a new video. And I will talk to you guys in the next episode. You guys have a good one.